The Max Wedge engines dominated the superstock class in the early to mid-60s, and it was the 413 Max Wedge that started it all. So let's check out all of its specs and find out what made this engine so special. The Chrysler president at the time, Lynn Townsend, had two teenage sons, and they hung out on Woodward Avenue in Detroit. They told him that Chrysler lacked street credibility. Well, Lynn decided he was going to change that, and the 413 Max Wedge was a direct result of his initiative. 1962 was the first year for the Maximum Performance Wedge, more commonly known as the Max Wedge engine, and it was the 413. Plymouth called it Superstock 413, and Dodge called it 413 Ramcharger, but they were the same engines. They were race-ready engines and not designed for street use. They were available in any B-body Dodge or Plymouth, except for the station wagons. The engine came with two different compression ratios, 11.0 to 1 and 13.5 to 1. Due to the high compression, Chrysler recommended to use 102 octane or higher. The 11 to 1 engine was rated at 410 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and 460 foot-pounds of torque at 4,400 RPM. The 13.5 to 1 engine raised both of those by 10, and it was rated at 420 horsepower and 470 foot-pounds of torque. At the bottom end of the engine, the crankshaft was forged steel, shot peened with hardened journals. The connecting rods were magnafluxed, and the pistons were made of forged aluminum. The oil pan had anti-slosh baffles, one in the front and in the rear, to keep the oil available for the pickup. And speaking of the oil pickup, the engineers designed a swinging pickup, which would swing to the rear under hard throttle and to the front upon hard braking. In the middle of the block was a mechanical cam with the duration of 300 degrees on the intake and exhaust. Because of the cam, the heads had double valve springs and high-strength retainers. The intake valves were 2.08 inches and were streamlined for higher airflow. The exhaust valves were 1.88 inches, which were 1/4 inch larger than the standard 413s. The exhaust valves were so big it was necessary to machine notches at the top of the cylinder bores on the exhaust side to make clearance for the valve. Without this notch, the valve would hit the block. And maybe the biggest difference with the Max Wedge heads were the larger ports, which were about 25% larger for better airflow. Also, the heat crossover in the head was eliminated for greater volumetric efficiency. To assist those large ports in getting rid of the exhaust were streamlined, high-rising exhaust manifolds. At the top of the engine was the cross-ram intake manifold, which mounted the two 4-barrel Carter carburetors diagonally across from each other. The intake was a shortened version of the long cross ram. The shorter design generated more horsepower at higher RPMs. The previous long cross ram had 30-inch runners. The Max Wedge manifold were 15 inches long. Each 600 CFM carburetor fed the opposite side of the engine. In the front of the engine, the pulleys were deep grooved to help hold the belt at high RPMs, and the water pump had a small diameter impeller. Check out more Mopar videos here. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.